feel like you almost need to get over that first real challenge career-wise or whatever in life to know that you can get through it. So that it doesn't make it any easier, but when you get there again in life, you can look back and you say, okay, I've been here before.
Welcome to the Sports to Business podcast. Jeremiah, so good to have you on the show.
Great to be here, Tanvir.
Awesome. So a quick introduction for you. You played football at McMaster before I got there. Then you made a move to Olympics. And then you went into the corporate world as a speaker and a best-selling author. So we'd love to dive into all these great things and the journey you've been on since the beginning.
Okay.
Awesome. So what are you up to nowadays?
I'm a full-time professional speaker. So I have a sort of rough target of about 40 live events a year. And I've been doing this since the 2012 Olympics, sort of part-time, I guess you could call it, while holding down a job. But now for the last 2 years, I've been doing this exclusively keynotes, usually opening or closing slots for corporate events or associations, and sometimes educational institutions, universities. And I'm loving it. So I'm 2 years in and been working on all facets of being a professional speaker, the business side of it, the craft, the development of the content. And that's what I'm doing right now.
So tell me a bit more about that whole journey. Like when you became a speaker, how did you get started and what was it like? I'm sure there were things you didn't expect it to entail, right?
Of course. So I had a job offer from a university, Trent University. I live in Peterborough, Ontario. And I had this job offer to go into an administrative role, coming out of a leadership role with the Canadian Olympic Committee, building these athlete wellness and transition programs that we were working on there. I was there for about 4 years. And after 4 years, it was time for me to make a move. It was time to move on to the next project. And I didn't want to do the commute to Toronto. And so locally, the university here, there was this opportunity as an administrator within their athletics department. Long story short, I kind of took the job offer, but at the same time, I had published my book that I had been working on for 5 years, which was a memoir about my 4-year journey from beginner to Olympian as a rower after football. And so on the sort of momentum of that book, I was asked to speak at a couple local events, and then that led to a couple of other things. And all along in the back of my mind, I've really wanted to, since I did my first speaking engagement, I really wanted to carve out some time in my life, not just sort of a portion of my days, but like I wanted to figure out how I could go after it full time. And so this all began with a job offer that I kind of took. Like I worked there for 2 weeks, but I already had 3 speaking engagements booked. So I negotiated that I could do the engagements. So yeah, that's fine. But then I realized, okay, the opportunity's there. I don't know if I can make this, like if I can make a real living at this, but I have to try. And so I made a decision, as many entrepreneurs or anybody, going after a goal that is atypical from a, 9-to-5 career path, I had to make the leap. I had to make the jump and say, okay, what's my burn rate in terms of cash flow? What are my expenses? What is a very conservative estimate of the revenue I think I can generate in year one? And then off we go. So that's what it looked like.
It's kind of what I'm going through right now. So right before the podcast started, we were chatting about how I think I'm kind of following your footsteps. So I think it's a great inspiration for me as well. So great story here. I would love to come back to the speaking part very shortly. I want to understand from you. So when you started playing football, I remember it wasn't until later in high school and then you went to McMaster, or what was that journey like?
Yeah, I never played football until I got to McMaster. So I grew up playing hockey. I grew up in Cobourg, Ontario. And when I got to university, Mac, they didn't have a hockey team, a competitive hockey team. And so the next logical choice for me was to try out for the football team. I remember sending the head coach, Greg Marshall at the time, an email. I said, look, I'm tall, I'm skinny, but I'm mean and I'm, I'm determined. I talked myself up, I guess. Arrogant young kid. Anyways, he let me join the team. So usually, as you know, high school recruits are invited by invitation to training camp as freshmen and to try to compete for a spot, either on the practice roster or on the team if they're really talented. And I was a walk-on, and Greg Marshall, the head coach at the time, allowed me to compete. What's it to him? Like if the kids doesn't work out, you're out of here. Yeah. And I didn't know anything about football, Tanvir. I had never played a game of organized football in my life. And all I knew was those one-on-ones. I had to hit that guy in front of me as hard as I could. And I don't know, aside from like the obvious screw-ups and me running around like a turkey with his head cut off, I think what Greg and maybe the coaching staff, Jason Riley, who you would know was there at the time, the O-line coach, they saw enough in me to warrant keeping me around. And that's how my football career began at McMaster.
Well, it was just like, it's hard work and grit, right?
Yeah. It's funny how in the end of the day, it boils down to fundamentals and coming back to first principles, right? And my opportunity, I guess, was that a lot of these athletes, they had achieved some level of success at the high school level. And so they had some, I could see some of them had a chip on their shoulders. And I've always looked for that in whatever environment I come into, especially as an athlete. It was the same when I got to rowing, kind of looking for, okay, is there some in for me here where if I just absolutely throw myself into this and then sort of learn on the way, learn on the side, but make sure my effort and my commit is like next level. Maybe I can catch up to some of these guys, and maybe I can catch some people sleeping a little bit and, elbow my way in there.
This is such a great topic. So first principles, learning on the go. A lot of folks nowadays, I'm looking at the corporate side of things, really get afraid and boggled down with all of the different expectations people have. And a lot of times when younger leaders come to me and say, I want to have this role, the consistent thing I'm hearing nowadays is, I don't have the experience, or I don't know if I can do this job. But what you just said is exactly what I think, it's kind of what I went through in my corporate career. I was just thrown into a role to learn on the job. So like, what is your advice to younger leaders on like who are afraid of taking on a role, who know they want to get there, but they just feel that they don't have the right skills at the moment?
So look, part of my job now as a keynote speaker, I get to speak to executive CEOs like frequently. Every week I'm speaking to sometimes a CEO of like a major Fortune 100 company. Was talking to a group from Amazon just this morning, and you start to sort of pick from their playbook. And one theme that I'll share that I hear from these executives, because often before I do a keynote, they'll give their executive comments, or after my keynote, they'll sort of pick from sort of key messages that I delivered, and they'll put their own twist on it. And the thing that I often hear relating to that question is that all these executives and CEOs, they all felt in over their head. And they all took a leap of faith within their careers at different times. And they could all point to sort of these watershed moments where, an opportunity presented itself to them. And it was a very clear decision that they made to embrace it, to take it on. Sometimes it was a horizontal move career-wise. Thinking of John Hantho, CEO of CBI Health right now, who, I really look up to, respect the guy. And he was talking about how he did a lateral move so that he could learn more and then be in a better position for a further leadership role, sort of, up the ladder down the road. So that theme is just consistent. And I think the problem is when we expect that our feelings should be somehow normalized, like it shouldn't feel uncomfortable, or the anxiety should be, we should deal with that first and then go. And I think the answer is actually we've got to be able to hold that kind of a little bit of weight in the chest, right? You're feeling it, probably physically at times, and still be able to move forward and chip away. And I think that is a common theme I see from leaders who were at one point, young leaders who were at one point first job at a university, or 2 to 5 years into trying to figure out their career. And another thing I'll say is when you listen to them talk back, they never could have predicted how they arrived where they are now.
Yeah.
Like different industries, different functions, different roles, all sort of preparing them for where they are now.
What do you tell someone who's like, here's my 10-year plan. I want to have this role and this role. Here's what I need university for. Like,
I would say, I say, no, let's throw out that 10-year plan. Let's talk about your 4-year plan. I'm biased. I believe, in my life, it's definitely gone in 4-year cycles and these sort of, I think of life as seasons, but in years. You can often hear like long-time married couples speaking in these terms. And, 10 years today, well, okay, there's components of a 10-year plan. Let's say your values that probably aren't going to change. Maybe some really fundamental principles that you want to experience in your work and in your life, totally fine. And I think we all need to be doing that. But in terms of, let's say, goals that interact with a unique environment, your industry, your workplace, if you're an entrepreneur, the market that you're trying to enter, I think we need to be a little more, let's focus on the next 5 minutes. Let's get started. Let's have a goal. Let's have a vision, but then, hold those two opposing forces of this is going to evolve as soon as I begin on the journey. The plan is immediately going to evolve. It just does. And so, holding the determination to try to realize your vision, but allowing yourself to be jostled and maybe going down different directions to achieve that vision. 10 years may be a bit too long for that. I would suggest 4 years, I think, is still a sweet spot. That 2 to 4 years. And even when I was working in commercial banking, that was my first job at a university. It took me 2 years just to figure out what the hell I was doing, underwriting these deals, right? So if you're in a job that's going to require unique skill sets and competencies, you got to give yourself time just to learn so that you can execute and go. So those are my thoughts on a 10-year plan.
Last question on this topic. What are your thoughts on when someone says you got to work hard enough to get lucky, or work so hard to get lucky? Is that something where you see these executives that you speak to, where it's like they just did so much great work that an opportunity then presented itself to them because they were there at the right moment? It wasn't because of luck, but it was because they put themselves into a position to take advantage of something.
Yeah, I think there's truth to that. Serendipity. Certainly in the speaking world, you'll have a great presentation, let's say, and it'll lead to other things and new relationships. And, referrals are huge in any business, really, especially mine. But yes. And, how I actually feel about this question? I feel like you got to work hard. Like that's got to be a given, but focus is more important. Like assuming the hard work's there, the focus is the thing that's most at risk these days, because there's so much we can be thinking about in any given moment. There's so much like impulse control with opening tabs on our browsers and checking Twitter and LinkedIn and Instagram or whatever, that we have to understand that our minds are like fundamentally being rewired. And I see it as like a battle of attention span and directing it as you see fit according to your, through 2, 3, 4 year plan. So yeah, the hard work leads to opportunities, but I actually think that the focus is more important than ever, because it feels like we're all like just inundated with all these possibilities and opportunities and what could we be doing? And if we bring it back to keynote speaking, like I'm a keynote speaker. That is all I do. These opening, closing sessions. I'm working every day on like my flagship keynote. I've got, different content, but I'm doing repetition. I'm bringing the athlete mindset to growing very specific skills for a very specific market that I know exists. I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel this time. Maybe after I've been in it for 5, 7 years, I'm going to try to, bring my take on things. But that's a long-winded answer. I would say focus is just as important as the hard work. And then still things will happen that you didn't expect, but it'll be because you had the discipline and the focus to have trust in your decision-making at the outset and to see it through.
Working on your craft.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, what do I do? What do I sell? I sell keynote experiences, right? I've got to entertain people. I've got to inspire them. I've got to educate them. I've got to be a storyteller. I have to make people feel immersed. I can't compete. I can't sit here head and shoulders with a bookcase behind me and just deliver content. What I do as a speaker and professional speakers is something different. And so when a company is bringing together 200 people or 7,000 people, you are an insurance policy, right? So like, you have to understand your market. You have to be very focused about what the problem is that you're trying to solve and be ruthlessly focused about it. That's how I think about it.
Amazing. Well said. Would love to understand, Jeremiah, how did you make your transition from football to rowing? How did it all start?
So in my last year of football, I injured my shoulder. I tore my labrum. I was always kind of a skinny guy trying to play offensive line. So I always had big boys coming at me and, it wore me down. So I had this injury. I finished my 4th year. Talented athletes at the time around me, Jeff Robertshaw, Kyle Koch, Andrew Jones, Jason Araki, like Fabio Felice, like a ton of athletes going on to the CFL. And they inspired me to feel like there was still more in me to give. For me, I was like, man, I was hanging with these great athletes who are still going on to do great things. And I feel like I don't know what it is, but there's something more for me out there. 2008 comes along. It's the Olympics. I was a parent young in life, so I've got my little boy, the weight of responsibility. But I watched the 2008 Olympics, and the Canadian men's 8 crew won the gold medal. Mm-hmm. And that was a spark for me that began me on the journey of, could I do it? What would it look like? What would the first steps be? And almost, why is there anything that rules me out? I'm sort of like this pessimistic optimist. Like at first I want to understand all the things that are going to sort of structurally stop me and make sure I'm not deceiving myself. And if I can't find a reason, great. Now it's just up to me and my own feeble humanity. Let's throw it at the goal and see what happens. So that's how that all began for me.
Awesome. So when you started training, where was it, like a tryouts? Was it because I know some of the bobsled guys would try out first and then they get.
Yeah.
How did that work?
So I just moved to Victoria, 4,000 kilometers across the country. And I don't mean to be flippant about it. I needed a job. I had no money in the bank. I was coming out of university. I had a family to support. So I was applying for jobs in banking. I got a job with TD Bank as an associate in commercial banking. And they had 2 locations, one in Kelowna and one Victoria. And Victoria is where the men's national team, rowing team, was based. So I actually called the VP at the time, Jane Russell, and I said, "Hey, Jane, I'm really excited to start." She's probably thinking, "Who's this punk? Who's this first year hire at a university calling and wasting my time?" But I wanted so badly to sway the decision to go to Victoria because I knew that I was going to try to start to learn how to row. And I had to build my career, and the money from the job was going to support the rowing eventually. I had to save all my disposable income so that when I was going to go full time into rowing, it was going to be ready. So there was this, it was all very, very much part of a plan, but depended on a few things falling into place. The job in Victoria was one of them. And so Jane, the VP, I don't know what she did or if she said anything, but it worked out and I got to Victoria.
Wow.
Once I got out there, I found a local coach, happened to be one of the best coaches in Canada. His name was Doug White. And, without going into the whole story, he inspired belief in me that really took what I already had and solidified that, okay, there's something here. And, I knew he was an experienced rowing coach. He knew what it took to get to that level. And he also believed that it was possible. And so off we go. Rowing in the mornings at 5:30 a.m. before work for 2 years until I got that invite. Finally, I was getting good enough to join the national team. Not until 2011, a year and a half before the Olympics.
2 years of hard work every single day, every single morning, before you were even confirmed to be part of the national or Olympic team.
Yeah, correct. Two full years of falling in the water and learning how to row Rowing is very technical. It does take some time to learn the rowing stroke. But once you get the hang of it, then you can really accelerate on that learning curve, and you can start to put the fitness together. So yeah, you're right. 2 years of me and Doug in a dream and going after it in the darkness.
So what was the journey like after or during those 2 years and when you made the Olympics? I know you guys were silver medalists, which is amazing. What was the journey like? What were the ups and downs, and what was the whole experience like?
It was like pinning it, basically. It was like if you're in a car, just pedal down, go. And then pockets of just trying to keep your head above water psychologically, emotionally. The training was just, rowing is a power aerobic sport. So it's all about hours on the water at really high intensity. There's just no way around it. And so you're putting in all this volume. You're basically living in a training fog, which you're probably familiar with, right? Where you're just working so hard that you're half conscious during the time that you're not putting in the work. So time flies. The relationships that you build, the trust you build with teammates, you figure out which guys are there just because they want to be part of the national team and which guys actually want to win. And then you work your butt off to try to get in that group, in that training group. And then you try to show your merit and earn their trust. And all of a sudden they're pulling the expectation out of you, right? Which is totally different than you pushing something onto the world. Wow. What else? Yeah, I mean, it was. The core of it was just training, a dream, 9 guys and a coach that wanted to achieve this thing together. Really special, and as you know, sport often pretty unique in the singularity of intent and purpose. And I think that's what we love about sport, and that's what we as athletes try to find in our work going forward. So those are a few things.
So what have you taken from your experience in rowing and applied it to the business side or speaking side?
Yeah, the endurance element. Sometimes, Tanvir, I find myself in a room, with really smart people. And I feel like I'm a pretty smart guy, but I like to take my time. I like to really digest. I like to really understand. And I'm actually quite introverted. And, I really like to incubate on things. So sometimes I'm a bit slower. But I've realized over the years that we all have to identify our own unique dispositions and see where the strengths are in that. So for me, I know that even if I'm sort of behind, or I'm starting these new chapters in life every 4 years, I know what the cycle looks like. I know how I'm going to feel. I know what the anxiety looks like. And I know now how to navigate sort of the cycle of almost starting from a beginner, whether it's in a work capacity or as a sport or as a creative, and then work through that. So endurance and the thought that I've been here before, and I know I have experiences that are unique to me that these other people in the room that maybe intimidate me don't have, or they have their own strengths. But I think it's important to cultivate a certain amount of self-confidence in the things and the experiences that have brought you to where you are, and make sure that, because we're so focused on the things we still need to learn and grow and all the things we need to do, don't discount what you bring and what you have with you. Long-winded answer. Endurance, like what sport to business, endurance, focus. Again, I cannot say this enough. People are distracted out there, and it provides an opportunity for someone who's done a lot of careful thinking about an opportunity, and then is absolutely focused and able to apply execution day in, day out on the same, not, leading indicators that are going to drive the outcome, and just climb towards it over a few years. Athletes have that advantage. I think athletes are sometimes discouraged because when they get into the workplace, the culture is not quite the same. It's like, well, how do I find myself in this when, I'm hungry? And athletes all express that differently. But I'll shut up. But those are a few thoughts.
That's one of the reasons why a lot of athletes you see are great entrepreneurs, right? Because it's like you have this hunger, and you just want to go make things happen. Um, I mean,
Totally.
when I started like my corporate career as well, like I've a little shy before in terms of bringing all the football principles or like team huddles and just going hard at it. And but eventually, when I started doing all those things, the people around me kind of also elevated their performance, right? So I think a lot of
Right.
times the cultures that we're going into are not sports focused. So a lot of times we try to bring ourselves to a different culture. But eventually I saw that for me is like when I brought my true self to work, it actually helped lift everybody up as well because it's just a different type of environment that people haven't seen before. You mentioned a lot of times focus, right? How do you stay focused? There's like so many notifications, like emails, phones, calls, texts, social, and just so many distractions. What do you do personally?
Well,
Like,
here's the thing. Here's the thing. I love that question. You, I would say, look at the opportunity. If it's so hard to focus, it's so hard to focus for everybody right now, right? Everyone's dealing with the same challenges. So what that means is that there's a real opportunity in terms of self-discipline for those of us who are able to cultivate it on a level where, you know, we can control and direct our attention. And I know it sounds like such a simple thing, but I think that, man, if I look at my son's generation growing up now, you're growing up as a digital native. I don't know, like it's challenging. It's challenging to think like, how can you maintain that autonomy of focus and not just be like this like psychological manipulation is like next level, right? Of these algorithms. So that's what we're up against. But I would say, there's an opportunity, right? So if there's all this challenge, it's like, okay, it's going to be worth it if I can actually do this when most people can't.
yeah, like I think focusing on what is that initial goal or that objective that should be driving you, right? And then it's kind of like when I look at a tech
Right.
strategy, it's like, you've got this objective, every single thing that you should be doing in terms of launching a new app, enhancements, experiences should all be aligning to that objective. If a project you're working on isn't aligning to the initial objective, whether it's top line sales or profitability, then get rid of it. I think it's the
Yeah.
same thing.
Yeah. And so yeah, you actually sparked me on my train of thought, and that is, for me right now, I actually don't feel like, I want to be careful. I don't feel like I'm the most focused person. Like I feel like I really have to work at it. And more often I'm bringing myself back than being able to sort of time chunk 3 hours, 20-minute break, 3 hours, 20-minute break, 3 hours, something. That's not, I've got sort of four, maybe five, no, probably more like 4 good hours in the morning every day where I can be really productive and my brain doesn't get full of all this stuff. Like I'm winning the day if I'm able not to check my email in the morning right away. I'm winning the day if I'm not checking LinkedIn or, looking at my sales system and tinkering. If I can do sort of that deep work in that time that I know that I'm productive, and I can get to 12 o'clock feeling like, okay, I did 2 hours of speech rehearsals or content development versus just checking a bunch of emails. Now I can allow myself to have a little bit of leeway and not feel that angst and that inner rage at myself for not staying focused. So I battle with it, but I think because I'm always coming back to it, like you say, and I've sort of got the guiding North Star of that focus of where I want to get to, I fall back to focus. Fall back to focus. Don't fall out of, like, you're going to come out of it, but if you've got this groove that you created about coming back to the focus, coming back, that's how I think of it.
Wonderful. Amazing. One other topic I wanted to cover, Jeremiah, is I always speak to a lot of athletes about failure, and everyone is giving me a different answer about how they've handled failure adversity. Very, very curious to know your failures in life. I'm sure like everybody's got so many different ups and downs, adversity. How have you handled that? What goes through your mind at a time when you know that you're going to hit a roadblock? Like how do you get above that?
Yeah, I was thinking about this actually just today as I was getting in my car after dropping off my girlfriend at the train. The thought I had, actually, I'll just tell you what it was. I thought, when life gets hard, you got to get harder. And it's difficult because I've worked in the mental health space, and I understand the very real challenges of pushing through and actually having a mental health issue, which to me are two different things. You have to have a baseline of mental fitness before you can expect to really push through something that's sort of goal oriented that you're doing. So, I mean, after the Olympics, huge swings, highs and lows, trying to reinvent my identity, starting this new career in a nonprofit with the Canadian Olympic Committee, in a leadership role, managing people, remote, before COVID hit, and all these things I was just trying to learn. And one funny story I like to share is that there was one point about 2 years into working with the Canadian Olympic Committee where I actually called into the mental health helpline that I had helped set up for our athletes and coaches, national team athletes and coaches around the country. And I call in, and it's my voice, my recorded voice saying, "This is Jeremiah Brown, Game Plan National Manager. Welcome to the Athlete Coaches Helpline. Appuyez sur le 2 pour français, press 1 for English." And so I'm listening to my own voice, and I'm calling in, and I'm just, because I needed help. I remember I got to the point I was so stressed out that all I could focus on was the humming of the HVAC system, and the thought that someone's going to walk by my office and look in and be like, "What are you doing?" Like I was going to get caught. And this is the dark place we can get to, and becomes a mental health issue. So I actually had to call, and really it was as easy as, in my case, luckily, talking it through and untangling sort of the topology of my mind and all the web that it had created, so that I could just get going again. So I've been right from sort of mental health challenges to COVID most recently. The second half of the year, I'm in the event space. It was all live events before March 29th or whenever it hit. And I was having a growth year. Things were paying off from things I was doing a year ago, but then boom, the second half of the calendar is just wiped out or deferred till 2021. And now they're getting wiped out. And so huge stress. And okay, I got to go virtual. I got to build this studio. And I don't know how it's going to go. How is it going to translate? Well, you got to do that first one. And then you got to iterate and learn. So in those times, what saves me is the medium to long-term view, because that's what saved me at every point in my life. When I became a father, I said, okay, I'm in this for the long term. And man, those first few years trying to finish school and playing football, and thank God Ethan's mom was, a hero as a mom, but that long-term view, when I got to, when I tried to learn how to play football, that was a 4-year project, trying to make a starting role, which didn't happen until my 3rd year. Rowing, all right. If I'm going to be realistic about having a shot, this is going to be at least 3 years. I mean, it's going to be 4 years. Olympic Committee, 4 years. My book, 5 years. Now I'm 2 years. So I have the benefit of having been through it. We build trust in ourselves based on our past experience. We tell our own story to ourselves based on what we've realized. And I feel like you almost need to get over that first real challenge, career-wise or whatever in life, to know that you can get through it. So that it doesn't make it any easier. But when you get there again in life, you can look back and say, okay, I've been here before. It sucks just as much, but at least I know that I can get through this.
Yeah, different problem, but first principles.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Amazing.
Couldn't say any better than that.
Powerful. Awesome. Jeremiah, how can listeners, viewers learn more about you, your social handles, website, if you want to share that quickly?
Yeah. So back to focus. I'm not very active on social. I try to post on LinkedIn once a month. I'm on Twitter, I think at Jeremiah F. Brown. On LinkedIn, if you search my name, if you Google my name, my website will take you to everything you need to find out about me. But, I'm not saying that it's good that I'm not so active on social, given what I do, but I've been able to, I think, have the success I've had so far by being realistic about what I can do right now. And that's focused on my clients, focus on the events, focusing on creating a great experience. If people are watching this and they want to see me in action, you can probably register for the Cisco Connect event in November. I'm the closing keynote for that. So that's for I think most of there are 2,000 business vendors across the country. So I think it's open registration, so you can check it out. There you have it.
4-year Olympian, best-selling author, keynote speaker, amazing Jeremiah. Thank you so much for jumping on. Appreciate it.
Great to talk to you.
Awesome. Thank you. Team, remember to like, subscribe, and share with a friend, and visit tanvirbango.com for a ton of free content and exercises.